Welcome to Surrender School. All right, once again, welcome to Surrender School presents Joe and Charlie Big Book Study. This is week 10. This is our final week, and we're going to be studying steps 10 through 12. I'd like to, first of all, introduce you to Joe and Charlie. Joe and Charlie were members of Alcoholics Anonymous in good standings. They met in the 70s, and they found that they had an interest in the Big Book that they really enjoyed, and they started studying the Big Book, studying the history of the Big Book, and they started sharing that information with others and in group meetings. And in one of these group meetings, someone asked if they could record it so that they can pass it on to other people that were not going to be able to be available. And they did, and that became known as the Joe and Charlie tapes. Joe and Charlie always start any meeting that they have in saying that they are not the gurus of Alcoholics Anonymous, the Alcoholics Anonymous, the Fellowship, or Alcoholics Anonymous, the Big Book, and they do not speak for AA as a whole. And like Joe and Charlie, I am not an expert or guru, nor do I speak for any 12-step community or group. I am simply a person who has a passion for AA Big Book, Alcoholics Anonymous, and I want to do my part in carrying the message and sharing hope and recovery. So this week we're going to start with 10. We're going to start week 10 with step 10. And that can be found in Into Action, pages 84 and 85. So if you're following along with me, we're on step number 10. Step number 10 indicates, step 10, continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. Notice it didn't say promptly explained it, admitted it. So let's see what Joe and Charlie, I think this is going to be mostly Charlie talking on this particular one. So what is the purpose of steps 10, 11, and 12 if we've done most of the hard work in 1 through 9? Let's find out what they had to say.
We came here restless, irritable, discontented, filled with shame, fear, guilt, remorse, worry, anger, depression, and etc. We've worked the steps. We received the promises. Certainly we have undergone a change in our personality. We have undergone a spiritual awakening already. Now, if that's true, then what's the purpose of the last 3 steps? And many people will tell us the last 3 steps are to maintain our sobriety. I will agree that they will help us stay sober. But the word maintenance itself is a misnomer. To maintain something means to keep it as is. Now, we've made a tremendous amount of spiritual growth through the first 9 steps if we've got the promises. But if we tried to maintain this, eventually we start slipping back. And we start having trouble with people, then with ourselves, then with God, and we end up drunk all over again. Now, let's look at the last 3 steps, not as just maintenance steps, not just to keep us sober, but to see if we don't actually continue to grow in our relationship with God, with ourselves, and with other human beings.
But step 10 off the wall of this card says continue to take personal inventory, and when wrong, promptly admitted it. And it looked like if we just continued to take a little inventory, and if we were wrong, promptly admitted it, we would be doing the intent of step 10. So let's look at step 10 in a different light. This thought brings us to step 10, which suggests that we continue to take personal inventory and continue to set right any new mistakes as we go along. We vigorously commenced this way of living as we cleaned up the past. We have entered the world of the Spirit.
We've had a spiritual awakening.
Our next function is to grow.
To grow, not maintain, not stay where we are, but to grow.
In understanding and effectiveness. Now, this is not an overnight matter. It should continue for our lifetime. Continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear.
What step did we use to look at that in the first place? Anybody remember? Step 4, okay.
And when these crop up, we ask God at once to remove them.
What steps did we use there? 6 and 7, all right.
We discuss them with someone immediately.
And what step was that? 5, okay.
And make amends quickly if we've harmed anyone.
What steps did we use there? 8 and 9.
Then we'd resolutely turn our thoughts to someone we can help. Love and tolerance of others is our code.
Let's repeat that, what they had to say on that. It says, when it says, we continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. And that's step 4 in its basic manner there. When these crop up, we ask God at once to remove them. And that is step 6 and 7. We discuss them with someone immediately. That's step 5. And we make amends quickly if we've harmed anyone. And that's steps 8 and 9. Then we resolutely turn our thoughts to someone we can help. Love and tolerance of others is our code. That's 10 through 12. So that's steps 4 through 12 in that one paragraph alone. Once again, that was on page 84, Into Action. And now there's some questions that we should be asking ourselves on a daily basis when bothered. And remember, step 10 says, continue to take inventory, and when we're wrong, promptly admitted it. And a lot of times if we're wrong and we're bothered, one of our basic instincts has been trampled on. So let's hear what Joe and Charlie had to say about our basic instincts being trampled on.
Looks to me like if we follow the directions in the book, that we will be doing steps 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 every day on a daily basis for the rest of our lives. I would defy anybody in this room to do 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 on a daily basis and stay the way you are. You absolutely cannot do that. I've got that little inventory sheet right up here in my head, just as plain as day, and you do too. And what I've trained myself to do, if I get screwed up at 9 o'clock in the morning, used to I'd wait till I went to bed at night to do something about it. Well, when I do that, I've wasted another day in anger and worry and depression and etc. I finally trained myself that when I get screwed up about 9 o'clock, get off in the corner by myself. Say, okay, Charlie, who are you mad at? What did they do to you? What part of self is affected? What did you do, if anything, to set it in motion? Which character defect has come back to the surface? I can't get upset unless one of those old character defects has come back selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, frightened, or inconsiderate. I can spot it in just like that. I say, okay, God, you know I don't want to be this way. Please take this away from me, this selfishness or this dishonesty or whatever it is. I try to discuss it with someone immediately, preferably my sponsor. Sometimes I can, sometimes I can't, but I try to. Then I make amends quickly if I hurt anybody in this process. 10, 15, 20 minutes, it's all gone. The rest of the day is okay. I have wasted all the time that I want to waste in resentments and fear and anger and worry and depression and etc. I don't have to do that anymore. I just don't want to waste any more time. What little I've got left and that other kind of jazz, I've got a tool here that works every time. And as you continue to take personal inventory, as you continue to look and see who you're mad at and etc. and etc. and etc., you're going to learn more about yourself. As you ask God to take these things away, they become less and less. As you discuss them with another human being, preferably our sponsor, we know more about ourselves. As we make amends quickly, our relationship with the world and everybody in it becomes better and better. You can't do step 10 the way the book says and stay the way you are. You just can't. Your relationship with God, with yourself, and with your fellow man will become better and better and better and better. A new dimension of living that we never dreamed existed. Now be careful. This is just like 6 and 7. This is the other changing step. And if you stay fouled up, you can't blame it on anybody else any longer.
We can't blame this on anybody else. We have the tools now to make the change. We ask ourselves the question, where was my fault in this, me feeling this way? So I tried to put that in practice this week. It's harder than you think. Well, at least it was for me. So we're going to move on to, there are more promises at the end of step 10 here. And the promises for step 10 can be found on page 84 and 85. And if you will bear with me for just a moment, Charlie's going to explain it, and I think Joe's going to chime in towards the end of this.
This thing really does work, and you'll continue to grow. Now, after step 10, you got another set of promises. Let's look at them for just a moment.
I said, and we cease fighting anything or anyone, even alcohol. For by this time sanity will have returned. Remember it said we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves would restore us to sanity? Well, we get our sanity back on step 84, on page 84, by the way. For by this time sanity will have returned. For we will seldom be interested in liquor. If tempted, we recoil from it as from a hot flame. We react sanely and normally, and we'll find that this has happened automatically. We can see that our new attitude toward liquor had been given us without any thought or effort on our part. It just comes. That's the miracle of it.
And we go on, it goes on to say, and I'm going to skip this this next one because I actually did not put the sound on this one properly. We are not fighting it, neither are we avoiding temptation. We feel as though we had been placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected. We have not even sworn off. Instead, the problem has been removed. It does not exist for us. We are neither cocky nor are we afraid. That is how we react so long as we keep in fit spiritual condition. And for this, it's going to try to start the sound again, but I accidentally...
This thing really does work.
So I'm going to actually just bypass that. So now we move on to our sixth sense in step 10, and we're still in into action, and now we're on page 85 of into action.
Now, the next to the last paragraph on page 85. Much has already been said about receiving strength, inspiration, and direction, not suggestion, from Him who has all knowledge and power. If we've carefully followed directions, not suggestions, we've begun to sense the flow of His Spirit into us. To some extent, we've become God conscious. We've begun to develop this vital sixth sense, but we must go further, and that means more action. In other words, what's happened to us in these steps of 3 through 10, we've removed enough self-will that we're now becoming God conscious. And by now, we're beginning to receive some directions from God. Now, if the book says that God has all power and all direction, and I believe He does, the book says so. And it says God dwells within each of us, and I believe He does, the book says so. Then it really stands to reason that you and I have within ourselves all the knowledge and all the power that we could ever need to handle any situation which comes up in the future. It's called a sixth sense of direction. Develop the sixth sense of direction through prayer and meditation.
And I know that for me, when I was in recovery the first time, and I was completely in recovery for about 3 years, that is when I started to realize that I had this sixth sense. Now, I lost it as soon as I began to use my drug of choice again. However, I did have this because I was asking myself some of these questions on a daily basis. I was doing the do, so to speak. And before I knew it, my intuition had really kicked in. But then it became very muddled rather, by addiction and by worry, by doubt, by fear and insecurity, for absolute sure. It does happen, and I've seen it happen, and I've experienced it happening. I just can't do it if I'm using my drug of choice. So now that was step 10, and then we're going to move on to step 11, and we're going to finish up into action, which is going to be pages 86 through 88. This is going to be step 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for the knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. So let's find out what we do at night. The book starts out talking about the things that we do at night. We close out our day, how we close out our day to begin to learn about prayer and meditation. So we're going to be looking at page 86 on the into action, what we do at night.
Most of us, we get here, I didn't know anything about meditation. I thought meditation is when you tried to clear your mind of all thought. Well, I've never been able to do that. When I wake up in the morning, that sucker turns on and it will not clear out. I thought maybe it was chanting, listening to soft music. That's probably some forms of meditation, but I knew nothing about any of it. I knew very little about prayer, even raised in church. I only knew 2 prayers. One went like this: now I lay me down to sleep, I pray the Lord my soul to keep, and if I die before I wake. I'm not into that prayer anymore. That's dealing with death, and I don't want nothing to do with that. The other prayer that I used, and I bet you used it too, went like this: God, if you get me out of this damn mess, I swear I'll never do this again. Now I'm going to have to develop a life of prayer and meditation. Would seem to be impossible, wouldn't it? Bill Wilson is faced with the job of teaching people who are spiritually bankrupt how to pray and meditate, and Bill Wilson don't know how to do it either. Thank God he didn't. Because if he had really been knowledgeable, he would have written in such a manner that I could never have understood it. But he didn't know enough about it to be able to do that. What he did do is what he's done all the way through the book. He gives us some definite, valuable suggestions. And he said if we will use those in our lives today, we will develop our own life of prayer and meditation. He couldn't tell us how to pray and meditate, but he could tell us how to develop our own. For just a few moments, over on page 86, he tells us what to do when we go to bed at night. Here it is now in step 11.
He said when we retire at night, we constructively review our day. Were we resentful, selfish, dishonest, or afraid?
I believe that's step 4 again, isn't it?
Yeah. Do we owe an apology?
That must be steps 8 and 9 again.
Have we kept something to ourselves which should be discussed with another person at once?
I believe that's step 5 again.
Were we kind and loving toward all? What could we have done better? Were we thinking of ourselves most of the time, or were we thinking what we could do for others, of what we could pack into the stream of life? But we must be careful not to drift into worry, remorse, or morbid reflection, for that would diminish our usefulness to others. After making our review, we ask God's forgiveness and inquire what corrective measures must be taken or should be taken.
There's steps 6 and 7 again. So what the book is really suggesting is when we go to bed at night, we sit down and kind of take another little inventory. Step 10 was during the day when we're disturbed. Step 11 is before we go to bed at night.
One of the things that I looked at when I was doing this, it says sentence before last, but we must be careful not to drift into worry, remorse, or morbid reflection, for that would diminish our usefulness to others. I am such a negative thinker. It takes so much energy, it feels like, to stay focused on positivity or to stay focused on not going the morbid route for me. That this actually I practiced this past week because I knew I'd put this together and I wanted to try to practice it. And it seemed like I just was happy all week long by just not drifting into worry about morbid reflection. Now, I happened to also this week had to do my life insurance. And I immediately went to these negative thoughts, but I just changed the way that I was thinking, and it made a difference. It just made a difference. So just a plug for positivity, that's all. So also on step 11, we do have a daily inventory that's in the handout sheet. And I think that's still a link that is actually on Surrender School as well. And Joe and Charlie tell us a little bit about this daily inventory sheet to make sure that we are practicing step 11 here.
Little sheet here you could use. You can use anything you want to. The main thing is do we inventory or not? On one side of the sheet, we took the basic character defects: selfish, self-seeking, dishonest, frightened, inconsideration. We took all the other defects in the 12 and 12, which are the offshoots of those first four, put them on the left-hand side of the sheet and call them the personality characteristics of a self-willed person. We tried to find the opposite and put them on the right-hand side of the sheet. Call that the personality characteristics of a God-willed person. Now all we're trying to do is get from the left-hand side of the sheet to the right-hand side. And I can sit down at night with this little sheet and run down through it, making a few check marks. That shows me where I've been that day, shows me what I need to continue to work on.
And actually, once again, this week, I actually tried using that daily inventory sheet. I didn't find it very helpful for me for where I was during the week this week, but I'm going to continue to try to use it to see if it would be very helpful for me at all. We shall see. All right. We have prayer and meditation, and they're telling us what to do upon waking up. Now, remember, they gave us a little hint in step 10, but upon awakening, we are now on page 86 of Into Action, AA Big Book.
Okay. The next paragraph tells us what to do in the morning when we get up. On awakening, let's think about the 24 hours ahead. We consider our plans for the day before we begin. We ask God to direct our thinking, especially asking that it be divorced from self-pity, dishonest, or self-seeking motives. Under these conditions, we can employ our mental faculties with assurance, for after all, God gave us brains to use. Our thought life will be placed on a much higher plane when our thinking is cleared of wrong motives. Most of us get up in the morning, first thing we do is go to the bathroom. Then we head for the kitchen. And we get a cup of coffee and maybe a little food, and we feed the body. We get the body taken care of, we go back to the bathroom again. After we get the body all taken care of, we feed the cat or the dog. We start out the door. We go out to the car and we check the air and the tires, and we check the fuel in the fuel tank. We turn the switch on, start the motor, and we take off down the road. But what did we do about our minds that morning? We took care of all the material things, including our body. What did we do about our minds? Our minds are going to run the whole show all day. Did we check the air there? Did we check the fuel level there? Did we feed the mind a little bit? If we would take 5 to 10 minutes in the morning to ask God to direct our thinking throughout the day, ask God to give us the right thought and action before we even start thinking about the day, then chances are our thoughts about the day are going to be in better shape. If we spend 5 minutes in the morning there, coupled with 5 minutes in the evening when we go to bed, there's no telling what we could do with our minds. In thinking about our day, we may face indecision. We may not be able to determine which course to take. Here we ask God for inspiration, intuitive thought, or a decision. We relax and take it easy. We don't struggle. This is a form of meditation for busy people. And the book says when you face indecision, you can't decide what to do, recognize you don't have the answer. Turn to God and ask God for the right thought or decision. Don't struggle, relax, and take it easy. I think what it means is get your mind off on something else. And the way I get my mind off on something else is I go start mowing the grass, painting the house, or washing the dishes. And quite often my mind goes back to that subject, and I've got information I didn't have before. It says, why don't you call Bill? Maybe he'll know. And I call Bill, and Bill's got the answer. They used to say, wasn't it lucky I called Bill? No. This is a form of tapping into the sixth sense of direction. And if you practice at it, it gets to where it becomes a common thing to do. It's amazing how this stuff works. Very simple suggestion.
Once again, I did practice that this week and found it a little bit harder than I thought. Also found out I have a new addiction, and that is to social media. So putting down my phone, I would use that as my distraction point, and I wasn't getting the answer. So I started putting down the phone and just taking a quick walk. Or yesterday I did two loads of laundry, and by the time I finished them, I thought maybe I should call fill in the blank. And I called them, and that person had a wonderful word for me. So this does work. It really does. But I can't have the distraction of social media because that did me no good, actually. So yeah, there's that. So now we're still in step 11 here, and still upon on awakening. How do we pray when we wake up in the morning? He gives us some really great clues here on page 87.
Page 87, first full paragraph down there toward the middle of the page, tells us how to pray.
See, we usually conclude the period of meditation with a prayer, that we be shown all through the day what our next step is to be, that we be given whatever we need to take care of such problems. We ask especially for freedom from self-will, and we're careful to make no requests for ourselves only. We may ask for ourselves, however, if others will be helped. We're careful never to pray for our own selfish ends. Many of us have wasted a lot of time doing that, and it doesn't work. You can easily see why. As I said, I used to use God like an errand boy, send him out to get this done, get that done. It didn't work. He never did come back with nothing, you know. But I learned through doing that to start praying only for the knowledge of his will for me and the power to carry that out. And today I can't think of anything that would be better than to have God's will done in my life. Only.
Said to me, pray only for knowledge of his will and the power to carry that out. I said, how in the hell is he going to know what I want? And they said, he don't care what you want. They said he's interested in what you need. And he knows more about what you need than you know yourself. And that's turned out to be exactly true. If I had written a list of things that I thought I needed when I first came to AA, if I'd have said, God, give me these things and I will be satisfied for the rest of my life, I would have cheated myself. We need. He's not interested in what we want. Page 87.
So if our circumstance
Go ahead, Joe.
We ask our wives or friends to join us in morning meditation. Yeah.
Bottom of page 87. As we go through the day, we pause when agitated or doubtful and ask for the right thought or action. We constantly remind ourselves we're no longer running the show. Humbly saying to ourselves many times each day, thy will be done. We are then in much less danger of excitement, fear, anger, worry, self-pity, or foolish decisions. We become much more efficient. We do not tire so easily, for we're not burning up energy foolishly did when we were trying to arrange life to suit ourselves. It works. It really does. That's a full paragraph right there. We alcoholics are undisciplined, so we let God discipline us in the simple way we've just outlined. If you'll follow these definite and valuable suggestions on page 86, 87, you will develop your own life of prayer and meditation. You'll make your conscious contact. You'll be able to tap into that sixth sense of direction, and it's amazing the things that we can learn by doing that.
It really is amazing. And I really do like this little picture on the right side of the page there. Instead of email, it's called knee mail for kneeling. I really did like that one. So we're going to move on. That wraps up step 11. So now we're going to move on to our final step. It's just going to be step 12. Step 12 comes to us from working with others. I'm going to start on page 89 through 103. Step 12 says, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we try to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. And if we now go over to page 92, we're not going to start with 89 like they said here. We're going to start with page 92, how to carry the message or how to tell our stories to another suffering person.
Okay, we're going to talk now just a little bit about step 12, and then we'll be done. We don't want to go through this next chapter. We don't have the time, but I do want to look at 2 or 3 things in it very briefly. Let's go to page 92. Now, this is telling us how to work with other people, how to do our 12-step call, how to sponsor, and etc. The first paragraph says, tell him how baffled you were, how you finally learned that you were sick. Give him an account of the struggles you made to stop. Show him the mental twist which leads to the first drink of a spree. We suggest you do this as we've done it in the chapter on alcoholism. If he was alcoholic, he will understand you at once. See, this is what Silkworth told Bill to do. He will match your mental inconsistency with some of his own. If you're satisfied that he's a real alcoholic, begin to dwell on the hopeless feature of the malady. Show him from your own experience how the queer mental conditions surrounding that first drink prevents normal functioning of the willpower. In other words, we share our story, and we show him our allergy, our obsession of the mind, our hopeless condition of the mind and body, and if he's a real alcoholic, he'll match it immediately. We get his attention that way. We tell him exactly what's wrong with him. Page 93. Let him ask you that question if he will. Tell him exactly what happened to you. Stress the spiritual feature freely. If the man be agnostic or atheist, make it emphatic. He does not have to agree with your conception of God. He can use any conception he likes, provided it makes sense to him. The main thing is that he be willing to believe in a power greater than himself, and that he live by spiritual principles. In sharing our story and telling him what happened, then we get the idea of the need for the spiritual experience across to him, after we got his attention by talking about the problem. Page 94. Outline the program of action, explaining how you made a self-appraisal, how you straightened out your past, and why you are now endeavoring to be helpful to him. Talk to him about the program of action, take him by the hand, and walk with him through the program of action. You see, it's suggesting here that we do the same thing the first 100 did. It's suggesting here we do the same thing the Big Book does. You see, the Big Book was the 12th step in print. They could not go call on that person individually. So the book had to tell him the problem, tell him the solution, show him the program of action. Now, it's just as valid today, working with other alcoholics, as it was in 1939. We need have no question about how to 12-step. We need have no question about how to sponsor. This chapter tells us exactly how to do it.
And that just reminded me of a story when I came into the 12 steps room. The person who shared their story with me, I just remember thinking, well, I'm not that bad. Oh, I was doing things far worse than they had done, but I could not identify with it because I couldn't understand it when I first came in. And then when I was told that I needed to start sharing my story with it, I could see the exact same thing that I was doing. I found this is more prevalent in the food 12-step, the rooms of the 12 steps for food addiction and overeating than I have in AA. But I definitely could see people not identifying with it. They're just there because they want to lose weight, or it's usually not just to stop eating addictively or stop hurting themselves with food. It's usually just to lose weight at first. And then they identify with it once they've been in the rooms for a while. But this was a valuable asset for me when I started to look through the Big Book on how to carry the message and telling my story. And I would never, ever talk about the spiritual aspects until my sponsor asked me to start doing that. So yeah, it was pretty powerful. So on the next page here, we're still talking about step 12, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. We try to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles on our affairs. And one of the things that they pointed out is that step 12 is a 3-parter. It has 3 parts to it. So let's hear what Joe and Charlie has to say about the 3 parts for step 12 alone?
The 12th step has 3 pieces in it, very briefly. The first part is the greatest promise in the book. Having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. I think that promises to me that if I apply the first 11 steps in my life to the best of my ability, I will have a spiritual awakening. Now, what is a spiritual awakening? A personality change sufficient to recover from alcoholism. Bill tells us in the 12 and 12, there's many kinds of spiritual awakenings. There are people in AA, but they've all got certain things in common. That is, that we're able to feel, believe, and do things we could never do before on our own strength unaided. I feel things I've never felt before. I feel love, patience, tolerance, compassion, and goodwill toward my fellow man. I believe things I've never believed before. I believe God is a kind and a loving God. I believe He stands ready to help any human being anywhere in the world the instant they're ready to give up on self-will and turn to Him. I thought He was a God of justice. Thank God He's not a God of justice. If He was, I wouldn't be here today, would I? Now, I'm charged, though, with a responsibility. There really are no free rides. You do have to pay for what you receive. I'm now charged with the responsibility of carrying this message to other alcoholics. Not a message, not the message, not some message, this message. What is this message? Having had a spiritual awakening is the result of these steps. I'm not like I used to be. But I applied these first 11 steps and I had a spiritual awakening, and I'm not that way anymore. And if you don't want to be that way anymore, then you apply the first 11 steps and you won't be that way anymore either, because you'll have a spiritual awakening. It's the only message that AA's got. The final thing I have to do is practice these principles in all my affairs. Now, what are the principles? Oh, we hear arguments about this all the time. The principle of 1 is this, and the principle of the 2 is that, and No, I think he's referring to the steps. He said, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. He already used steps once in step 12, so he's not going to use it twice. So this time he'll call them principles. Another place he calls them proposals. In the front of the 12 and 12, he says the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous are a set of principles. He's referring to the steps.
Wow, that was pretty powerful. And then there are also questions that we should be asking ourselves related to step 12. And Charlie will go into a very long list of questions that perhaps would be helpful for us to ask ourselves related to step 12.
Now, it's easy for me to practice the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous in AA. I love you. I hope you love me. And we're going to do our best not to hurt each other. But I'm only in AA at the most an average of an hour a day. What do I do the other 23 hours? Can I practice these principles, these steps in my home with my spouse? Can I realize just how powerless I really am with that lady? Can I realize the insanity of trying to control her knowing full well I can't? Can I make a decision and turn her will and her life over to the care of God as I understand it? Can I inventory me and find those defects of character that keep me trying to control? Can I talk about that to another human being? Can I become willing to have God remove and ask Him to do so and take those away? Can I make amends to her quickly when I've harmed her? Now, there's times I'm ashamed of me. There's times I treat absolute strangers on the street with more courtesy than I treat my own wife and my own home. Can I practice them with my children? If I can do this with my children, what little time I have left with them is good times. If I don't, I try to control, they resist, we have no good times at all. I might pick up another hour, 2 or 3 a day there. Can I do it on the job with my co-workers? And if I could do it on the job with my co-workers, well, I might be peaceful, happy, and free there for 8 or 9 or 10 hours a day. Aren't we really saying that we have a set of tools that if we practice them in all our affairs, we can be peaceful, happy, free, and serene 24 hours a day, 365 days a year if we wish to? My sponsor used to say, Charlie, you can be just as happy as you want to be. And I'd say, you old fart, you have no idea what you're talking about. Today I hear myself saying, you can be just as happy as you want to be. You got the tools to do it with. Now make no mistake, God is not going to do this for you. Other people are not going to do this for you. But you, with God's help and the help of other people, can do it for yourself.
Yes, you can. And I'm certainly, like I said, I've been practicing this hard this week, and I actually did see such a difference in the way that I was thinking, the way that I was behaving, the way that people were responding and reacting to me. So I definitely know that this actually does really, really work. Now we're going to turn over to page 164, and that is, although I put working with others, it really is a vision for you. And that's on page 164 of AA's Big Book. Let's hear how we're going to close out the next couple of slides here.
Page 164. Said our book is meant to be suggestive only. We realize we know only a little. God will constantly disclose more to you and to us. Ask him in your morning meditation what you can do each day for the man who's still sick. The answers will come if your own house is in order. But obviously you cannot transmit something you haven't got. See to it that your relationship with him is right. That's the only relationship this book talks about, by the way. See to it that your relationship with him is right, and great events will come to pass for you and countless others. This is the great fact for us. Abandon yourself to God as you understand God.
We did that in steps 1, 2, and 3.
Admit your faults to him and to your fellows.
We did that in 4, 5, 6, and 7.
Clear away the wreckage of your past.
We did that in 8 and 9.
And give freely what you find and join us.
We'll do that in 10, 11, and 12.
And we shall be with you in the fellowship of the Spirit, and you will surely meet some of us as you trudge the road of happy destiny. May God bless you and keep you until then.
And that does conclude Joe and Charlie's portion of the Big Book study that Surrender School has been so gracious in allowing me to present to you. But we do have one last piece of we do have one little message left that I want to make sure that I'm sharing with you from Bill W. himself. This was taken from an interview that he did, and I want to say it was in the late 60s, but I have yet to find the actual dates on them. But I would love for you to hear from Bill W. So you'll have to pay close attention, perhaps even turn up your volume slightly, because it is very poor sound quality.
Now we see in retrospect that this really meant that the first group of Alcoholics Anonymous had already taken shape in Akron, the city on the hill. I think, before concluding this part of the project, that all of us should humbly reflect on the marvelous chain of circumstances, doubtless ordained by Providence, which had brought us thus far. It required the humility of Dr. Jung in his office telling a patient, only a spiritual experience can save you. My art cannot. It required a messenger, his patient, who came to my friend Ebby. And then it required Ebby taking the time and caring enough to look me up. No personal link in the chain of those early events could have been more critical and important than that of Dr. Silkworth, the man we later called the little doctor who loved drunks. We must never forget that it was he who told us the nature of our malady. It was he who during his lifetime attended some 40,000 cases. After AA started, some 12,000 cases. Ah, yes, his contribution was indeed indispensable. He was, I repeat, the little doctor who did love drunks.
And then our final message from Bill is coming from the very end of this video. By the way, if you click the link at the bottom here, if you've downloaded this, the video link will take you directly to it so that you can watch the entire hour-long video. Its quality is not the best, but it is great information.
First, we alcoholics have greatly deformed those near to us. And she has posed that problem and has since been a part of its solution in the Al-Anon groups. Well, let's round out this wonderful chain of events. I began to work with other alcoholics in New York. We began to go to Oxford group meetings, and there we met Dr. Sam Shoemaker, the Episcopal rector. What he gave us in the way of personal inspiration is beyond all description. His impact on us in those early days certainly registered, and the principles emphasized by the Oxford group later lent themselves very readily to the formation of AA's 12 Steps and the publication of our book, Alcoholics Anonymous. And we, from there, go to other indispensable people in the chain. Ann Smith, whose experience had been similar to Lois, staying by Bob. Bob, the first alcoholic to be sober following my own recovery. And then to make a group where 2 or 3 are gathered together came Bill. And so, for us of AA, that was the beginning. If this means of communication between us and you proves to be useful and a happy one, I hope we shall make some more of them. Meanwhile, God bless all of you, and Alcoholics Anonymous forever.
Thanks for recovering with us.